Oh, how I've missed you all. It feels so good to be back inside a body. I must say that Travis really hasn't been taking good care of himself. Walking around in this body is like trying to break into a new suit. Good lord, he's stiff as a corpse most of the time. I guess he's trying to fight me in some way. How adorable. Now I'm well aware of what you all are wondering. And yes, it does feel amazing to not have your mouth stitched up after almost 100 years. It's very relieving and enjoyable. Oh, and I suppose you all want to know how I managed to escape from Baron Samedi. Well, as with most things in life, there are plenty of loopholes in getting out of tough situations. You all assumed that once I was dragged into the cold ground, that would be the end of me. And normally it would be. I even considered that it was the end of the line for all King Creole. And while my poor old body was laid to its earthly rest, my soul easily escaped from the Baron's clutches. I had always envisioned that something may happen to my old body. And while making Travis into a puppet was mostly for my own enjoyment, there was a practical reason for doing it as well. Taking over Travis's body would be the simplest way for me to escape from the Baron's clutches. And now that I'm back to the lovely world of the living, I have so much unfinished business to attend to. After thoroughly startling Alexandra with my attire, I pushed my way past her and ignored her continued annoying questions. I did not have any time to deal with the traitor at that very second. So I just continued onwards until a familiar little voice caught my attention just before I was out the door. Wow, Travis. You look just like Mr. King Creole. Olivia's sweet innocent voice rang out as I put my hands on the doorknob. Turning to look at the living room, I smiled nice and wide when I saw her face. Much less so when I saw her playing with that template doll I had Travis use to punch in for work. Well, what can I say? I asked with a chuckle, tipping my hat to the little girl as I walked over to her. She smiled with all the love in the world towards me. I could tell just from that how much she had grown attached to Travis. Smiling and staring down at her, I got on my knees and patted her on the head. Tell your mother not to wait up for me. I'll be gone for a bit. But don't fret. I'll be back to give y'all a big thank you gift. I said with a cheery grin, which she responded to with a childlike gasp, and to wrap her arms around me. Staring at the template she had left on the floor, I nearly wanted to spit on the foul thing. But hearing Alexandra rushing down the stairs, I quickly stood and headed out the door. No time at all to be dealing with whatever it is she thinks she can do to stop me. My first stop on my long road to rebuilding everything began at the police department. Strolling into the office, the front desk worker stared up at me with terror. I responded back with a smile, leaning against the desk and taking off my hat. Mama always said to respect the police. Hello, dear. I greeted her, taking the hat and placing it down on the desk. Go on and bring me your chief, please. I do believe we have business to attend to. I told her. She nodded quickly and started running off to go find the old man. Taking my hat and placing it back on my head, I drummed my fingers against the desk in anticipation. So it really is you. A voice broke the silence. I looked over at the old man and gave him a nice wide smile. God, it feels so good to finally do that and not feel like my mouth is about to be ripped apart. In the newly living flesh. I exclaimed with a good chuckle. Spinning on my heels and showing off Travis's body. The boy might look like me in some ways, but at the same time, it's like wearing a very expensive suit that you must simply wear at all times. What could you possibly want with us? You abandon us for God knows how long and just waltz back in here in a new body and act like nothing ever happened, Creole. Your deal with us is off. The old man declared, his weathered and exhausted face trying to muster up any kind of emotion that he could. But he made a bad mistake. My deal with all of you is off, huh? That means yours too. I said with a smile. To which his face showed an instant sign of regret. He quickly raised a hand to protest. Only for his hand to fall off his wrist and crumble into dust. His entire body began to collapse in on itself as he stumbled towards me. I backed away from him. I wore all black after all. I didn't want to get his ashes all over me. The old chief slowly but surely collapsed into a pile of clothes and ash on the ground. His screams of death fading into an almost echo-like wind. Did you do to him? The female officer from the front desk asked, and she lifted up her gun and pointed it at me. I looked back at her with a warm smile and approached her. Her finger twitching on the trigger as I walked closer to her. A rookie. But at least she knew who I was. I'm simply ending his and my deal. No more long lifespan for him. I shrugged, looking down at the ashes strewn about the floor of the station. I looked back at her with a smile and walked closer to her, taking the gun from her trembling hands and tossing it over my shoulder. "You wanna be chief?" I asked, looked at me with bewilderment, and I delicately placed the old man's badge in her hands, closing them around her and tipping my hat to her. It does feel good to instill that sense of fear into someone other than Travis. I could tell she was running over everything that had happened to her. She looked at me and quickly handed the badge back to me, causing me to raise a brow as I took it back. "No. Not like this," she said, puffing her chest out a bit to try and show me that she meant that. I nodded and offered her a genuine smile. Not many like her out there. She's honest and wants to work her way up. "Fair enough, darlin'." I nodded, tipping my hat to her and tossing the badge up and down with my hand. "When y'all figure out who's succeeding him, gimme a call. Clearly, a new deal is needed to be hammered out. Unless y'all want the crime wave to continue." I chuckled as I turned and walked off, tossing the badge over my shoulder and listening to it rattle around on the floor as I walked off towards the entrance. With the police situation at least temporarily out of my way, I next headed off towards the site of my lovely Voodoo shop. Enjoying my way there, I was suddenly hit with a splitting headache. It really threw me for a loop as it had been decades since I last experienced any kind of pain. Grabbing the wall as I slid down it, I clutched at my head as I looked up. The world began spinning, and soon enough I had that bastard trapped in my head and I was able to take back control. I gasped and panted as hard as I could as I got myself to my feet and looked around. Him in control felt horrible. It was like being paralyzed as some alien creature forces you to walk, talk and act like it. Worse still was being locked up in my own mind. I was able to see the me that exists when I black out. And let's just say he's as terrifying as I feared him to be. He's horrible, and the less said about him the better. Staggering to my legs, I looked around and stumbled forward to try and find a spot to collect myself and just think. I elected to go to a nearby park. Lucky for me, no one ever goes there except to walk their dogs and let them crap all over the place and not pick it up afterward. Looking around as I walked through the chain link gate, I rushed to the nearest bench and just sat there hyperventilating. "I can't go back to the house," I mumbled to myself, jumping at any noise I heard. "I'll just put them all into danger." I mumbled to myself. "What, going to turn into a hobo?" that familiar southern voice asked me. I turned and saw him sitting on the bench to my right, his legs crossed and a smile on his face. I shot up and was about to run when I realized it wouldn't do me any good. So I just sat back down in defeat and tried to put as much distance between us as possible. "Maybe I will. As long as it ensures you don't hurt them," I said, looking at him with a scowl. He touched his chest, as if he were offended, and scat at me. "Me? The one to hurt them? Surely your little friend behind you is the one you should be worrying the most about." He pointed behind me. Following his finger, I was greeted by my own face smiling nice and wide back at me. Flinching back, I stared in horror as the image of myself stared at me with the same creepy smile Creole had always reserved for me. This couldn't be happening. I really was losing my mind. "Come on, Travis. You've left me in the dark for so long, and it takes him to show up to finally come and let me see again," I asked myself. This Travis was the one that murdered my parents and God knows who else. How he appeared before me was evidence enough. His black suit drenched in blood splatters, and the crazed smile I had seen from myself just before being able to wrangle control back. This can't be happening, I mumbled to myself. Trapped between the two. Creole put his arm around me and held me in a chokehold of sorts while he rubbed my head. I tried to wrangle free from him, but it was for nothing, as whenever I tried to move, other Travis pointed a sharp kitchen knife at me. "Oh, it is, Travis my boy," Creole hummed as he held me in the uncomfortable stranglehold. And when his hands went towards the stitches across my neck, both me and other Travis instantly froze in our tracks. The smile on other Travis dipped a bit as he looked up at Creole. "I see both of you understand what happens if I rip out y'all's stitches. Maybe that'll make you both behave yourselves," he said with a chuckle, shoving me away and into other Travis's hands. "You wouldn't do that," I said quickly, shoving the other me away and looking back at my former boss and former abuser. "You need my body, you wouldn't dare touch me," I quickly shouted, standing from the bench and wanting to leave, only to find myself sitting right back down the second I started walking away. "True," Creole said with a soft and happy hum. But all I need is you two to slip and allow me back in the pilot seat. You're fighting a war on two fronts, Travis. And you can't hold us both down." Creole giggled, other Travis joining in with him as he realized just what this opportunity meant for him. "You squish me down, he'll take over. Squish him down, I'll finish up my business," he said, folding his hands and placing them on his crossed legs. "He's right, Travis," the other me said in excitement, bringing the knife up to my neck and causing me to stay completely still for fear of him even nicking the stitches on my throat. "I've been eyeing that little family we've got back at home for a very long time. Maybe now I'll finally get a chance," he giggled, causing me to bash his face in with the back of my head, causing him to drop the knife and grip his nose. "Now children, no fighting," Creole scolded the two of us, causing us to stare back at him and forcibly quieted down. He stood and fixed his tie, brushing his black hair out of his face. "I'll let you take the reins for now, Travis. But the second you start slipping, I'll finish what I started here." He chuckled with a smile, tipping his hat to me as he seemingly vanished into thin air before my eyes. Other Travis also disappeared when I looked behind myself. I never felt more lost or terrified in my entire fucked up life. Why didn't I go to college? I ask myself that every day. But honestly, with my luck, I'd get shackled with some professor that wants to brainwash me or something. That would really be my luck for that to happen. As for now, I'm currently stealing the Wisconsin Phi from a coffee shop a decent way from both the Voodoo store and from Alexandra's shop. Hopefully, it's enough time to let one take control and regain some strength to stop them from doing anything. Alexandra, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry for everything. Honestly, I really wish you and Olivia could have just moved as far away as possible from King Creole as you could have. Then you two could live a nice normal life. Not shackled with a useless ex-voodoo puppet that either wants to kill you or use you for some horrible voodoo ritual. I just wish I could tell you both how sorry I am. And how badly I want to slice your throats open and watch you both plead and beg for mercy. Coming for both of you.